lot of them are retired. Oh, but what's his name? He's still alive.
Are looking at the awesome robotics and everything that we have set up in the back there, and we want to definitely leave plenty of time for you guys to continue to mingle after the presentations today, and time for lots of discussion. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Keisha Rogers, and I'd like to welcome you all this evening to the Schiller Institute's event on the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, but on the future of space exploration. We've titled our event tonight, 50 Years After Apollo, NASA's Project Artemis, a new generation of space explorers emerges. So, yeah, and I can see in this room, we have a lot of new generation of space explorers. Like myself, a number of people in this room were not around for the first moon landings. And, you know, we are looking forward, after almost 50 years now, of moving forward with mankind's exploration of space. So, what I want to do first is, to get us started off, I'd like to start off with a short video clip.
We call it Apollo. What many people don't know is that Apollo had a twin.
She was a woman named Artemis.
Goddess of the moon.
We are returning to the moon.
As a new generation of explorers. This time to stay.
And to prepare to achieve humanity's next giant leap of sending the first human missions to Mars.
We believe our course will redefine what is possible.
That we will discover life-saving,
Earth-changing science.
and that the challenges ahead will inspire generations.
This is our manifest.
For all who wonder if we could return,
For all who dream of pressing beyond.
This is your calling.
We go for all of America.
We go. We go as the Artemis generation.
we go.
Okay, so, thank you. Just so I can set the stage here, for those who don't know, in 2017, President Donald Trump unleashed a bold initiative to return Americans back to the surface of the moon by 2024. Now, officially in March, that program was escalated and that program was accelerated from a 10-year drive to get humans, American astronauts, back to the moon, to being accelerated to 2024 to actually land on the moon and have the first female astronaut to land on the moon and the next man. And what I want to do, this is going to be very exciting. So what I want to do is I want to take a few moments here to just go through the conception and the vision of what NASA is working on right now for what they have named Project Artemis. And as you heard in the video, Project Artemis, Mission Artemis, is named for the twin sister of Apollo. And this Apollo mission was our first moon landing missions. And so this next mission is going to be named for the goddess of the moon, named Artemis. Now, let me go ahead and get the first slide here. I'm just going to go through, and I'd like to thank these slides have been recently made available. This is some of the slide projections that come from Lockheed Martin, who's a principal worker on the Artemis project right now. So, path to the pole. Now, what has been determined is where we're going to be landing and going. The direction we're going in is to the south pole of the moon. So, the Artemis 1 is going to be what's called the first mission. Artemis 1 is going to be an unmanned mission that will actually fly. This is an uncrewed mission, send an exploration class spacecraft further than ever before. So this spacecraft on Artemis 1 is actually being built by the Orion capsule, which will eventually take the astronauts on it. Is being set forth by Lockheed Martin. You also have now the European Space Agency has contributed a European service module called the ESM. And this is also, both of these things, the Orion capsule and the European service module, which Vice President Trump just announced is ready to go at the July 20th anniversary celebration. Both of these, are going to fly on the SLS space system. So this is the rocket system that the new service module and the Orion spacecraft will fly on. So again, this mission is going to travel to the furthest point for almost 40,000 miles above the surface of the moon. It's going to test the capabilities and test all of the operations and hardware systems of the Artemis project of the Orion spacecraft and the mission. Secondly, so where we're going with that mission is we'll start to develop in 2022. You have some of the key companies working on building a lander, but particularly they're going to first start off by putting together the components, together the components of the Gateway platform. So this is where we're going to be going. NASA is building a platform that's going to have a service module, that's going to actually have a habitat, a place where you will have the propulsion systems, and where the Orion spacecraft that will eventually take the astronauts to this location will be able to dock and also eventually land from there on the surface of the moon. So the Gateway project is going to be starting to be built up, and the components will go up around 2022 and 2023. Later on, 2022, 2023 is when you're going to have the Artemis 2. Now, this is going to be where you have your crewed mission. There will be 4 astronauts traveling aboard the Orion spacecraft that will take flight on the SLS flight system, rocket system. And this is going to be a 21-day mission. The mission will orbit the Earth twice and move into a high elliptical orbit, and then eventually it's going to go into translunar injection, and we have a special guest who will be able to tell us very soon here how this works and how he helped to prepare the way of getting the first Apollo astronauts to the moon and having to figure out some of what was necessary in terms of the orbiting cycles. So you will also, once this is done, as said, you're going to have the astronauts are going to be going and flying around the moon. They're going to do something similar to what was done with the Apollo 8 mission. The Apollo 8 mission was the first mission to go and make lunar orbit and to return without making a landing. And so they won't be making a landing. Now, the third mission titled Artemis 3, Forward to the Moon, or is when we're going to all be watching our TV screens in 2024, and we will hear the announcement coming from the television and all over the world. You will hear the announcement of Shackleton Base here. The Artemis 3 has landed, and everybody is going to cheer. So Artemis 3 is where we're going to be landing our first astronauts since 1972 on the moon. And this is going to be a 30-day mission of the Orion capsule that will rendezvous with the Gateway orbiter, the Gateway platform there. And this is going to be done, as I said, you'll already have the propulsion system being developed by the Gateway. You'll already have a small habitat module. And what's going to happen then is that from the Gateway, you will have 2 astronauts that are going to descend onto the surface of the moon. Now, you ask, where? So where are they going? Where are they going to land? Well, it's now been announced that, let's go to the next slide, please. Polar destination, that we're going to be sending our astronauts to what's known, again, as the Shackleton Basin or crater region. And why is this important? Well, this is in the South Pole, and you probably have heard a lot of people are very excited about the South Pole. South Pole has been South Pole region of the moon has become the hot spot. We just had recently in the South Pole region and also on the far side of the moon, Chinese far side landing on the far side of the moon. You also have had recently a just launched mission by the Indians whose destination is to go to the South Pole of the moon, where their launch is expected to reach the destination around September sometime. And America, we have chosen this location, which is a very prominent location for building a permanent settlement and colonies on the moon and for sustainability. And to the idea is that to land on the moon by 2024 and to be able to build up the capabilities for permanent lunar presence and colony by 2028. Now, what is there is in 2009, with the L-Cross system, we were able to detect what's called water ice on the moon. And so this became a prime spot for actually a place that you can land humans on the moon, but that would have the capabilities of oxygen, water that can be developed and broken into the components in terms of having for hydrogen, oxygen, for the ability to be able to live and sustain a presence on the moon for a long time. And the idea with this is that the Shackleton crater is also said to be one of the largest impact craters in the solar system. So this is a prime spot. Now, we didn't really know this beforehand. We didn't know that until about 2009 with the development and the findings of the L-Cross landing system that there existed what was called water ice on the moon. So this is a major development. Now, what I want to just tell you to think about is, you ask, well, why are we here today? What does the Schiller Institute have to do with this? This is great. I'm very excited about the space program. I've been a strong proponent of the space program for a very long time with the Schiller Institute. But Schiller Institute, our role in promoting the space program has been through the idea of advancing the extraterrestrial imperative of mankind. The Schiller Institute was founded by economists Lyndon LaRouche and Helga Zepp LaRouche in 1984. And we are not only promoting the development of science and development of culture and promoting the creative powers of mankind, but our organization has been working with some of the key scientists and rocket scientists, engineers, people with the space program. We started off, one of the key founders, co-founders of our organization was a gentleman by the name of Kraft Erica. And you may not know him, but some people may remember or recall that the first rocket scientists to come over to help to build the Saturn V rocket were German engineers. And Kraft Erica was one of the German engineers, space scientists, and visionaries, pioneers who came over after World War II. And he later on started to work with the Schiller Institute in terms of the promotion of the moon and the solar system as the destination of mankind as a spacefaring species. Kraft Erica once said, if God wanted man to fly, he would have given man a moon. And this is the idea, is the moon has been put there as our destination to explore and develop. And it's not just for one nation, but for all nations. And what I like to do here is, our objective and our understanding is, it's not just going to be the United States going back to the moon, as even the president and the administrator, NASA Administrator Bridenstine has recently very strongly indicated. It's going to be with our international partners, it's going to be with our private sector, commercial partners, but that we're going to go as humanity. As people remember, may recall, during the Apollo missions, we went to the moon for all mankind. And we're going to be going with all mankind and the development of mankind's exploration of space as the imperative of mankind as a spacefaring species. And I'd like to just play a video from our founder.
I would suggest that that's a great work. The first thing we want to put out there was the spice, the flavor.
Louder.
Louder. I want to believe from Russia, China, India, and the United States on Mars. We're talking about the best thing from China, what we have from China. China's always talking about what they have the truth, policy, always. I would be
Louder.
Vietnam and Russia.
You can hear it.
Put the mic there. So we want to start having a word on the future. But the future is probably going to be about Mars. Not what we're going to, how we're going to carve it up, but how we're going to get human beings there and back, safe, quiet. Now that's going to take a science driver program, which is easy to conceive of, because we already had that kind of thing in the space program earlier. So revive it, refine it. Now let's come to an agreement on what our objectives are. Not define our objectives, but the objectives. And we're going to have a committee which will constantly look at the list of the questions. We're going to look at the existing space program. We're going to think about how we have to overhaul it for this purpose. And we're going to talk to human beings for the first 50 years. 2 generations. People living today. People who are young adults today will still be living for peace. base our entire economic development on looking at everything from that standpoint. We say, we are in the generation which is going to go to Mars. We're going to solve the problem of relativistic travel by human beings in well-controlled magnetic fields and gravitational fields. We're going to travel that distance and send a piece to Mars. We're going to develop advanced colonies there. And this is going to be mankind by going into a one-gravity relationship. The travel of human beings between 2 points in the solar system. We're going to change the definition of the meaning of the term mankind. We now think of mankind as earthlings.
And I wanted to play that. Actually, Mr. LaRouche passed away back in February of this year. But as you also know, President Trump has initiated that NASA is not just going to the moon in 2024 with the first woman and the next man, and to build a permanent presence, leading toward building a permanent presence on the moon by 2028. The idea is that we will go forward to Mars, and if anybody has really set the standard for what it will take to get to Mars, as not just crossing your fingers and hoping we'll get there, but building up the science and technology, building up what's called a science driver mission, as we had with the Apollo mission. It has been the Schiller Institute and partners that we've been working with. So what I'd like to do, as I said, is our guest here? Hello. Is we are not going alone. As you know, the space program has been working with the International Space Station, our collaboration with our partners in Russia, and partners from around the country and around the world in the European Space Agency. I'd like to invite a special guest from the Russian consulate to come up and say a few words. Mr. Belichick, thank you. I'm going to learn that. Thank you. And he's going to just give us a few words on some of the cooperation and work that we have going on with Russia.
Thank you very much. My name is Vyacheslav. I'm honored to represent Russian Federation here in Houston. I work at the Johnson Space Center for maybe a little bit louder. Louder?
Speak closer.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. And first of all, I'd like to stress that this month, all the United States and the international space community will celebrate the anniversary of the Apollo mission. And first of all, I'd like just to say a couple of words of respect to the first American heroes and team of these, I would call them world citizens, who made a real breakthrough and opened the moon for the Earth. This was a real breakthrough, and they became the real lunar pioneers who showed us with their courage and with their will to win. They showed us how to explore the space in the future. And today, 50 years after that commemorative event, we have the space, as far as we see it, we have the space much more available for the mankind. When the Apollo team reached the moon surface, it was a huge risk, and I suppose, I'm too young for that, but I suppose that nobody knew for sure if they would have an exit or would fail. So now we have it more stable. The world's, mankind's space sciences and space exploration are more stable. We have much more information and we have much more resources. At least all the digital industry and so on and so forth. We have it all to make the success guaranteed. And we also have a very fruitful and really very complicated international cooperation that is the International Space Station. At the time of the Apollo mission, it just didn't exist. As a diplomat working in this space sphere, I have to admit that, well, I would like just to pay attention that the international cooperation in this regards, I guess that Brian would agree with me that as a good economist, that the first and the most important reason of international cooperation is share of economical spending. This is the most important. There is no country in the world today that can afford to build up and deploy on the Earth's orbit a huge thing that is the International Space Station, but together we can do that. The mentioned project of this lunar space deep gateway is also confirms the same. There is no country that can do it by itself, but together we can do it. And the International Space Station today is one of the most important resources for all the mankind in this regards. We have from time to time I visit Johnson Space Center. You know that Russian Federation, we have our team there that helps to, so there is an interchange between Johnson Space Center and the Russian Space Center in Moscow. That the teams, they interchange and they control this International Space Station flight. So I visited this center from time to time. I talk to my colleagues, and I see that there is a very solid basis of cooperation, and we can use it for the future. And when I mentioned the economical features of this international space cooperation, I'd like to tell you, Brian asked me to tell something about the ongoing Russian projects in space, so I would like to tell you about the most recent development that our scientists achieved. You know that to get the space station, astronauts, the Americans call them astronauts, the Russians call them cosmonauts. So, since Russia is the only space carrier who get the lifts to the space station and back, so now they fly together. So astro-cosmonauts, it takes them at least, the shortest way to get the International Space Station was 6 hours. Normally it's like one day, so it's too much. This was a big problem because at the end of the first day in this space condition, the astronauts, cosmonauts, they all feel exhausted because this is the period of assimilation of the human body to the space conditions. So the Russian Space Agency, Roscosmos scientists, precisely the Federal Agency Energy scientists, they developed the shortest way. It's called one single pass way to the ISS that takes just 2 hours, not more. So this is a huge economy of fuel, of money, of human bodies. I mean, like human resources, astronauts and cosmonauts, and these developments can be used in the future in the projects like the lunar project. So, and the second, maybe it would be interesting for everyone. The second important thing that we just launched, it was the space telescope, space observatory, called, it's Russian German project. It's called Spectre RG. That is going to build up, to design the map of all the available universe available for us. This is very important. Now it's on the way. It was launched in the first days of July. It's on the way, and it will be deployed in so-called Lagrange point. It will be deployed in the late October, and it will start working in the first days of November 3. And this observatory, made of two telescopes, Russian telescope and the German telescope, it will make the most detailed map of all the universe that is available for us. So the last work of this kind was made like 30 or 40 years ago. Considering the speed of light and all of that, with our technologies that the mankind we have now, that would be a great breakthrough for space studies, and the breakthrough for the most close projects like the lunar one and the international one. So this is what we are working on now. Russia as well has its own lunar program, and we have more projects. But I have to stress that today the international cooperation in space becomes more complicated, because 30 years ago it was when in 1998 Russia and the United States launched the first modules of the ISS. There were countries. So Russia is one power, one space power, United States another space power, and then joined Canada, Japan, JAXA with the European Space Agency, etc. But that was level of states. Now we have a huge, fastly growing private sector. So this makes it all more complicated, but on the one hand. But on the other hand, can you just imagine that how available is space for us right now? If just a man with money can build up a space enterprise, a spaceship, and they send a couple of tourists to the low Earth orbit, and then to get the state contract to I don't know, develop something, or to maybe move some things there and back. This is like the dreams of our fathers, maybe my grandfathers. These dreams really become true, and the previous lecturer, she was absolutely right, saying that it's very soon, maybe 5, maybe 10 years, but during our lives, we will see this breakthrough, and this opens the real new era in the human civilization in general. And not to be so pathetic anymore, it's very important. It's great that we can talk so simply about so huge and important things, just not about it right now. Maybe in 5 or 10 years we will remember this lecture and say that guy was right. That lady was right. And the basis of all of that today is the real international cooperation in space. As I told, there is no country that can afford developing of a space program by itself. First of all, because of the scale, the large scale of the programs that we are going to develop. And to my experience, from my private experience, the international cooperation, the most benefit of it is absence of unification. Each country finds different ways to resolve some problems, or to find some ways to get something. Maybe, I don't know, in Russia it's a famous joke that I guess it's about that the pencil and the pen and the space. But one country invented pencil, another country. For some millions of dollars to ride in space. Another country just use pen. So there are in practice living. I talk to the different astronauts, cosmonauts in their interesting but essential life. They meet a lot of examples of that. Different countries can bring different experience, and then can, in general, this can do the exploration of space, first of all, cheaper, and second, faster. So this is what we need right now. If you have any questions, I'll try to, yeah.
Could you say anything about any of the Russian experiments aboard the space station?
You know, unfortunately, I'm not a scientist. I'm not even sure that I mentioned pen and pencil correctly. So we are, as far as I know, we were preparing to deploy a new scientific model of the ISS. You know, the ISS is built up different models, like for energy, for living, for different purposes. So we were preparing to deploy the new model in 2021, but now these works are frozen or goes something wrong with that. We need to have money, just like you. So yeah, but the scientific this scientific part of our work of job of Russian cosmonauts on the board of the ISS is one of the most important things that they are doing. And as far as I've heard, that we make excels on the fundamental investigations. So this is, it's like classic, it was classical for the Soviet Union, it's classical for Russia. So we're trying to, since it's a very expensive project and very unique, so we are trying to use it for some fundamental things. So this is the main accent that we are doing abroad of the ISS. Unfortunately, I cannot say anything in details about concrete projects, but if you need some more detailed information, you can send me an email. I'll try to get something for you. For you from my friends in this field.
Yeah,
So,
there was talk going back a few years that Russia might do part of the gateway on the moon.
Yeah, but no, I haven't heard anything about that. I mean, in recent times, I haven't heard anything. I just like you, I just read more. I know that, I mean, read more in this field. We have each country and each space agency has its own space lunar program. The moon is the goal number one for everyone. And as the previous order said, that everybody is going to the South Pole because there is water. There is a chance to process water there, and there is so-called Helium 3 that could be used as a power source for this, fusion. So each country, each space agency has its own moon program, and there are other projects. For example, the Russian moon program. It's not very different from the gateway. We have a project to get the surface of the moon on 2030, exactly at the South Pole, and we are going to deploy the permanent base by 2040. The same India, they want the same Chinese space agency as their own plans. And unfortunately, I have to admit that this lunar project initiated by the United States and then accelerated by the United States, at some time it became very political. So in this regard, being a diplomat, unfortunately not a cosmonaut, I would not risk to suggest anything, but because I just don't have any concrete information. but the project is great. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. So our next speaker is someone who is going to tell us about how we're going to get back to the moon, because he helped us to get to the moon in the first place during the Apollo missions. And he has some strong insights on knowing what it takes to get to the moon. Our next speaker is going to be Dr. Don Cooper, who is a retired physicist. He worked on helping with the Apollo 11 launches, and also was part of the team, a team that actually helped to bring the Apollo 13 crew back to Earth safely. And he was very instrumental in helping with the designing of the Saturn V rocket. So I'm not going to take more of his time. I'm going to bring Mr. Cooper up so he can tell us more about the very important work that he did with our space program during the Apollo missions, and what we can look forward to for the future. So, thank you for being here.
Now I know how the dinosaurs smell. What I've done for the last 10 years, I've gone around to schools and I give my talk to show them how we went to the moon and back, and through that, try to encourage our young people to study math and science. And about 3 years ago, the Science Now project contacted me, and they said, you know, we work with third graders to get them interested in science. Would you come talk to them? Well, that was a whole new experience. I've been talking to high school students and taking calculus, college students, and suddenly here's the third graders. But I can tell you they're enthusiastic, they know about space, and they're interested in science and math, and so it's great to see them. So, when we, back in 1961, let's see if I can, so here we go. Okay. When NASA was first given the job to go to the moon, they had to come up with a name, and they chose Project Apollo. By the way, I worked a little bit. I started out at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, and I spent about a month or two working on the rocket design, not designing, but running simulations of the rocket that was going to take us to Mars. It made the Saturn V look like a toy. It was so big. So we were thinking about Mars back in 1962. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy came to Houston and spoke at Rice University. He said these words: I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. 8 years later, Neil Armstrong said the Eagle has landed. Back in those days, this is 1960 time frame, there were two men that people thought of when they thought of space. First one was Robert Goddard. The NASA Space Center in Maryland is named after him. He did a lot of experiments with small rockets, figuring out how to make them fly and what kind of propulsion they could use. And then Werner von Braun was born in Germany much later, 1912. When he was 22 years old, he was appointed head of the entire German rocket program. They developed the V-2. Later on, he wrote a book called I Aim at the Stars, and we used to snicker and say, yeah, but he hit London. Nobody ever said that in front of him, but in 1960, the German team was brought to the United States in 1945, right after the Second World War, because the Army realized we needed to learn about rockets. And they were put out in White Sands, New Mexico. And right before 1950 or so, in that time frame, they were brought to Huntsville, Alabama. And in 1960, and they worked for the Army. But in 1960, when NASA was formed, he was appointed head of the Marshall Space Space Flight Center and said, it's your job to build a Saturn V rocket that will put us on the way to the moon. This is Wernher von Braun right here. This is President John F. Kennedy. They used to come to Huntsville. Everybody came to Huntsville. Eisenhower came, Lady Bird came. Here's JFK. Here's Lyndon Johnson right behind him. They came. Everybody came to Huntsville because they wanted to see the test firing of the Saturn V rocket that would break windows 20 miles away. This is Robert Goddard, 1936, out in the snow with his little rocket here, you can see. I tell the kids, things start small. I was in Florida a few years ago and I saw suddenly the Mercury Redstone standing in the parking lot of a restaurant. This is the rocket that put our first astronaut up into space. This is the Saturn V in Huntsville, Alabama. It stands outside this 3-story building where there's one laying on its side there also. If you get a chance, go to Huntsville. If you want to see rockets, go to Huntsville. Huntsville, Alabama, and the Air Force and the Army built a lot of rockets, and there's a lot of them there. These are scale models. This is the Mercury Redstone right here, comparing size to the Saturn V that took us to the moon. This is the Saturn V configured to put our very first space station up into Earth orbit. This is a shuttle that went back and forth to orbit for a long time. So what is the Apollo mission? We lift off from the Earth, we go into orbit around the Earth, check out our systems, blast out from Earth orbit, coast 3 days to the moon, go in orbit around the moon, go down to the surface, come back up to lunar orbit, blast out of lunar orbit, coast 3 days back to the Earth, open our parachutes, land next to an aircraft carrier, get on a jet airplane, fly back to Houston, and it's 3 days round trip. Somebody said, I've only seen you out in the yard. Well, I went to the moon back. Not the way it was in those days. So here's the Saturn V lifting off on the way to the moon. Here's the launch tower, as tall as it is. This is the 5 largest rocket engines ever built, 1.5 million pounds each. There's 5 of them, so that's 7.5 million pounds. The rocket weighs 6 million pounds when it lifts off. These are our first 3 astronauts that went to the moon. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins. I heard on TV, and y'all have probably seen a lot of the really good stuff on TV here recently. I heard one announcer say, yeah, there was Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and that other guy.
Michael Collins.
Here's what I tell the kids. It's not like you're walking around and you suddenly end up on the top of the world's tallest mountain. This is how you do it. Robert Goddard, PhD in physics, Wernher von Braun, PhD, Neil Armstrong, master's degree, Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin, PhD from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Stay in school, get all the education you can. This is what opens up opportunities for you. So, where do we go? Well, here's the lunar equator right here. Here's a smooth area between this mountain range and this mountain range. It's the easiest place to get to on the moon. South Pole is probably the hardest place. So why not pick it 50 years later? Well, it's the easiest because it took the least amount of fuel. And that's always a consideration when you go. On the plaque, on the leg, one of the lunar lander legs, which this is what the lunar lander looks like with the 4 legs. On one of the legs is this plaque, and it still sits on the moon. Dear men from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon, July 1969. We came in peace for all mankind. Signed by the 3 astronauts, Richard Nixon, President of the United States. By the way, Michael Collins designed the Apollo 11 patch. He was a very talented guy, even though he didn't get to go to the moon. So we have Apollo 7 that went up into Earth orbit and tested out the command module and the service module here. You can see there's a nose cone where the astronauts live. There's what's called the service module with its rocket at the end. Then Apollo 8, and as we've just been told, Apollo 8 went around the moon. And you can see the symbolism of the figure 8. And then Apollo 9 tested out not only the service module again, which is same as here, but the lunar lander. And what they did was practice rendezvous. They got up into Earth orbit, they were apart, they went together, they separated, they went back together, so on. That was very important. And Apollo 10 did much of the same thing, and then it was time to try for the moon. You can see the Earth here, the lunar surface, and the Eagle landing on the moon. The astronauts named their vehicles. Neil Armstrong named the lunar lander the Eagle. So when he radioed back, the Eagle has landed, we all were glued to our black and white 12-inch TVs, and we were all very excited. And then we had Apollo 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 missions. They went to the moon. 6 of them succeeded. 1 of them did not. Apollo 13, right here. So how do you get to orbit? Every mission that goes anywhere away from the Earth is going to go into Earth orbit. And it's going to do it very much like the Apollo did. Every rocket does this. You lift off at time 0. In about a minute and a half, you exceed the speed of sound. Here, the Saturn V, in about 1 minute, 6 seconds, you exceed the speed of sound. And then you have the second stage, and then the third stage, and about 12 minutes after liftoff, you're traveling at 5 miles per second. You're 100 miles above the Earth, and you're in Earth orbit. And then, in order to get out of the Earth's gravitational field, you're going to have to gain another 10,000 feet per second, which is 2 miles per second. So you proceed to do that, and now you're traveling 7 miles a second when you leave the Earth. This is for the physics students. Okay, now, what we were ready to do now is lift off. Now we have our Saturn V here ready to go. That's for dramatics. The kids all get it right out there. Okay, here we go. Our 6 million pound rocket lifts off. It goes up. As soon as it clears the launch pad, it rotates to put what we call fin number 1 downrange. Then it starts the tilt program up towards Earth orbit like this. And you've all seen it on TV. Before too long, we run out of fuel. It goes in the ocean. Then we have 5 more rocket engines that are 1 million pounds each, and they push it higher and faster until we run out of fuel again. It goes in the ocean. And then we have 1 rocket engine on the 3rd stage, and this ignites and pushes us into Earth orbit. So, here we are. Here's the Earth, and we've just gone up into Earth orbit like this. We're circling the Earth 100 miles. And what we do then, we check out our systems, and then we reignite this engine, and it pushes us out of Earth orbit, and we go out into space, just like that. Now, when we first leave, the moon is over here, and it's going to move around the Earth. So while we're coasting for 3 days, you can see everything's in motion. We have the Earth in motion going through space. We're in motion going around the Earth. We're going to coast through space. The moon's going to move over here. And at the end of 3 days, we're going to end up exactly 10,000 kilometers in front of the leading edge of the moon. Right here. When I first went to work for NASA in 1960, my boss was a woman. That might be a shock to you. She was a very good mathematician. All of us that worked for her had no problem whatsoever. She was an excellent boss. And she called me in her office one day in about 1963 and said, you know what, we have developed the guidance equations. I worked in a section called guidance analysis. Nobody told us what that meant, so we thought we could develop some guidance equations. Turned out there was a group across the hall that was already doing that, and we weren't supposed to be doing that at all. But we didn't have anything else to do, so what she told me was, we don't know how we're going to get up into Earth orbit, but we don't know what direction we should be pointed here, since we will end up there. So I want you to work on that problem. Well, I can tell you, I had no earthly idea. My dad was in the oil field. We moved all over Oklahoma, Texas. I knew a bunch of small towns. We actually lived in Utah for a couple of years. Other than that, I hadn't been out of Oklahoma. And suddenly, I was supposed to be out where the moon was. So, I kind of made up this joke. We didn't know what to do, so we picked up our cell phones and we called up Sir Isaac Newton. The problem was, we didn't have cell phones and he'd been dead for a long time. So we were kind of on our own. I went to the library. I made a story out in California. You know, they send up rockets for interplanetary travel. So they got to know about how to get to the moon. They said, we don't have a clue. We never thought about going to the moon. So I was on my own. So anyway, as a result, about 2 years later, I did figure out how to do it. And my equations did fly first on Apollo 8 and forever and Apollo mission after that. And did get it. That's the most recognition I've ever gotten for that. Thank you. We go into orbit around the moon. We continue on here, and eventually we come out of lunar orbit. We come back here like this to the Earth. So, where we are right now is here. And we're going like this. As soon as we complete our burn, pretty quickly, I'll go back over here. As soon as we complete our burn, you would never guess what happens if the service module disconnects from the S4B stage, which is our third stage. And look at this. It opens up. You know, something just like that. We're traveling 7 miles per second. Of course, most vehicles are, so it's no problem. They turn around like this. This animation didn't go like that. They turn around and do their docking maneuver. Like that. And then pull the lunar lander out of the S4B stage. This goes into outer space. And now we have this configuration where we have the astronauts here and the little cone in the middle. And then we have the service module with the rocket here. And then we have the lunar lander here with the rocket engine at the bottom. Down here at the bottom. And we're traveling through space just like this. When we get close to the moon, we've got to slow down to get into lunar orbit. So we fire this engine. That slows us down, and we're in lunar orbit. Then the astronauts crawl through the tunnel. They go into the lunar lander and separate like this. And then Colin stays in lunar orbit here. And Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong are here. Now, at the right time behind the moon, this is a bigger model of the lunar lander made by Ron Fields over there a while back with the 3D printer. Nice and bigger so you can see it. So they're behind the moon, and let's say this table is the surface of the moon. So back behind the moon, they fire the descent rocket here at the bottom, and it slows them down. Now the lunar gravity starts pulling them down towards the moon. They come out from behind the moon in this configuration, just like this. And what they're doing is they're killing off their horizontal velocity. The idea is at the right time, they're going to pitch up and go straight down and land on 4 legs. So You can see at this point the two windows in the front, two little black windows here. They're on their back looking up. They cannot see the surface of the moon. When they come out behind the moon, they're starting down, and at 10,000 feet they do the pitch up maneuver, and for the first time Neil Armstrong, who is on the left, can see the surface of the moon. And what does he see? He sees where the guidance computer is going to land the vehicle. He sees craters and rocks. He doesn't see a nice smooth area. So, what? First of all, as a physicist, the first question you would ask, how does he know where the guidance computer is going to land the vehicle? On the window he's looking out of, there are crosshairs drawn. And they know exactly how tall Neil Armstrong is. He's standing up, so they drew the window, the crosshairs, where he could see exactly the control system's going to put where it's going to land the vehicle right there in the center. So he looks at it. I know it's hard for you kids to believe that we'd invented the joystick by then. He had it right in on it. And if he clicked twice to the right, it would change the landing site to here. Pull back 3 times, it would change here. But he looked beyond and he saw it was smooth, so he did redesignated downrange 3 clicks and changed the landing site to right there. So now the guy's computer flew over the deal. Now he also has control of the thrust on the lunar lander, so he can adjust the speed that it goes down. He can also, as it gets close to the moon, he can maneuver around and pick out the exact spot he wants to land. So this kind of leads to the idea that he was flying the vehicle the whole time. He was not. There was an astronaut that announced that he was going to land manually. He got in the simulator, and I heard this secondhand. I wasn't standing there watching, but I heard secondhand that he tried 100 times one night. He killed himself 98. And he managed to land maybe one other time and was successful one time. And when somebody told me this story, I said, I bet he had trouble finding the second guy to go with him. But that was the last talk I ever heard about landing manually. So now we're starting down to the surface of the moon, and this is what it looks like. I've got a recording here that will let you listen to the conversation between Buzz Aldrin and Mission Control for the lunar landing. This is what we heard on our TV.
Put the mic in.
Put the mic And notice they talk about the 1202 alarm. What happens is every second, the guidance computer takes into account the altitude, the velocity, and where they are relative to where it's going to land, and calculate the direction that this rocket should be firing and how to get them down properly at less than 3.5 feet per second going straight down. The reason why that's important is because these legs become the launch pad to get back up into orbit. If they should land crooked or tip over or something like that, they're not going home. So it's fairly important that they land properly. What had happened is that the long-range radar had not been turned off, and that there were 2 radar signals coming in. One for the short range as they got close to the surface, the other was the long range, and it was overloading the computer. And what the computer would do is just throw away the solution and start all over again. If it did that too often, it couldn't come up with a solution, so they couldn't land, so they would have to abort.
Keep on looking right, you're down.
Mission Control says, no problem, just keep on flying.
What else do we have here? 35 degrees. 35 degrees. 23. 700 feet, 21 down. 33 degrees.
The voice you hear there is Buzz Aldrin. He's telling Neil Armstrong their altitude velocity.
15 down, 2.5. 19 forward. Altitude velocity right. 2.5 down. 35 feet. 13 forward. Forward, down right, 200 feet. 4.5 down. 5.5 down.
60 seconds, which means 60 seconds of fuel left, 30 seconds of fuel left. There are 3 probes that hang down from 3 of the legs on the lunar lander. When any one of them touches the surface of the moon, a light comes on right in front of Armstrong. He has a half a second to turn off the rocket engine to settle in properly and land. They're about 6.5 feet long, so he's about 6.5 feet above the surface when that light comes on.
9 forward. 20 feet. 100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward. 5%. 75 feet, that's looking good, down and a half. 60 seconds. Down 2.5. 20 feet, down 2.5. Pick up some dust. 3 feet, 2.5 down. 4 forward, drift to the right, roll. 76, down and a half. 30 seconds forward. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. APA at a decent. Focus on low dollar, decent instrument over right off. Engine arm off. 413 is in. We got to get down, Eagle. And we'll be safe here. The Eagle has landed.
It was an exciting time, I tell you. Many of us have worked almost 10 years for this event, and it was something else. One of the school kids asked me and said, "What were you thinking?" I said, "I was thinking, whatever goes wrong, I hope it wasn't something I worked on." So here they are on the surface of the moon. Here's the lunar lander, American flag, the seismic sensing device, the first scientific experiment that was put on the moon. This is Buzz Aldrin standing here. I was in Huntsville, Alabama, and the fence was only less than 3 foot tall, so I wanted to get a picture to show the relative size of the lunar lander. So here I am, and there is the lunar lander mock-up. Here you can see the descent engine. Here's where it separates when it goes back up into orbit right here. And here's where the astronauts come out the door, down the little chute, down the ladder. Okay, so now they're on the moon. They pick up rocks and get back in, and they blast off, and they go back up to lunar orbit. And when they do, guess who comes along to the power of mathematics exactly at the right time? Michael Collins. They do another rendezvous maneuver in lunar orbit. They dock. They go back through the tunnel. They discard the lunar lander, which crashes into the moon. They now use their larger rocket engine to blast out of lunar orbit. They start back towards the Earth. They don't need this anymore. They then end up with this cone that has asbestos on the bottom to get them back. They start into the Earth's atmosphere. The center of gravity is offset so that the force vector perpendicular to the flight. They come in upside down. They dig into the atmosphere. The guidance computer rolls 180 degrees. They actually gain a little bit of altitude. And now the aircraft carrier's down here, and here they are traveling 7 miles per second. They run out of big rocket engines, but they have some small ones around the edge. So what it does, it rotates 90 degrees, flies this way, 180 flies back like this. By flying back and forth like this, the guidance computer can control how long the flight is. So they get close to the aircraft carrier. They open up, frogmen come out, they open up the hatch. The 3 astronauts are inside, and they take them out and put them on the aircraft carrier, and we return them safely to the Earth. How many of y'all saw one of the films on TV showed Poppy Northcutt, the only woman in mission control? Did y'all see that?
Yeah.
Well, Poppy and I sat next to each other for about 6 months. More accurately, we froze together. We were in a temporary building in the parking lot of TRW the winter of 1965. And boy, was it cold. It rained every day. And she sat to the right of the door, and I was to the left of the door. And every time the door would open, the wind would blow in. And let me tell you a Poppy Northcutt story. She was a woman liver. She wore little mini skirts. She was good looking. She was also a smart mathematician, I'll tell you that. But the other building, and he had a bottle of Jack Daniels in the bottom of his desk. And at least once a day, Bobby had to go over and talk to him about something. And we always thought that's how she got to stay warm. I don't know that for a fact. Oh, if she had called me, I left word with one of the news people to ask her to call me. She hadn't called me. That's the first question I'm going to ask her. Is that true or not? And we both left the space program in 1972. We went over to TRW Controls and we developed software over there to keep the lights on in this building. That's what we did for the next 10 years or so. And she left, went back to law school, ran for judge, became a lawyer, became famous. Didn't know she was going to be famous. She was 25, I was 27. What do we know? So, how's my time? Am I up? Okay. I'll just say a couple of words about Apollo 13. At midnight, I got this phone call, and when we come out to mission control, and the reason why is because I've spent the last couple of years with a project studying all the abort phases for the Apollo mission. And the Apollo 13 had an explosion when it was about right here, almost to the moon. And so the normal abort would be to burn the service module engine and turn around and just come back like this. But the problem was is that the window was frosted over. They couldn't align the vehicle, and there were a lot of other problems. Nobody was going to ignite that engine anyway. And so the decision was to do nothing. And when you do nothing, the moon's gravitational field pulls you around the moon, and you come back with a perfect entry. The problem with that was it took longer, and those of y'all who have seen Apollo 13 movie saw very accurately all the different things that happened. Well, anyway, I was out of mission control at midnight, and we did our simulation runs and told them exactly how to do this abort maneuver, but it wasn't done. So, you know, there were a lot of people that worked on that. In fact, here's my summary of Apollo 13.
Wow. Yeah.
Everybody from Boston to California was working on some problem that they had worked on. And I was actually invited to a party. That's why I added this. Nobody invited us nerds to parties. All because we started studying math in school. So that's my part, like I say. But that's how we did it. You will see similarities on the new program, because how is she going to get to the moon? It's going to be somewhat similar. And the South Pole is going to be harder to get to.
Questions. We are going to give you time for questions. We have one more speaker, and then I would like to have a discussion period after our next speaker. Who is going to be Brian Lance with the Schiller Institute. I wanted to say just quickly before I bring Brian up that just recently the last Apollo 17 astronaut to land on the moon, geologist Harrison Schmitt, was just speaking and gave a interview presentation with the Telegraphs, and he spoke about a Moon-Mars settlement is extremely important. He says, quote, "A Moon-Mars settlement is extremely important for the dispersal of the human species throughout the solar system and possibly beyond." And later in that interview, he starts to talk about, as we're here this week commemorating the 50th anniversary of the first Apollo moon landing, started to talk about the future of, in 100 years, the celebration of the Apollo moon landing on the 100th anniversary, 50 years from now. He says, there will be settlements on the moon, people living there permanently, producing the resources of the moon. Settlements on the moon are going to be a piece of cake. And this is from Harrison Schmitt. So what we just heard is, look, we know how to do it. We've been there, we've gone to the moon, we've developed the resources. When we go back, it's not going to take us another 50 years, and once we get there, we're going to stay there permanently. Now, what Brian is going to go through is not just the fact that there's a question of, oh, well, yeah, that's nice, sounds exciting, but how are we going to pay for it? They're never going to give us the money. But we have to create the will in the American people, in the population, that this is our manifest destiny. This is where we belong, man's extraterrestrial imperative, the spacefaring species, and that nothing should hold us back from accomplishing this goal. Because as President John F. Kennedy said, we choose to go to the moon. Not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And we are going back. So again, Brian has some words for us.
Okay, thank you. If you could just skip ahead to 8. We'll keep this compressed, short. Number 8. It's the plan for Project Artemis. Over there. There we go. Okay. So just picking up on Project Artemis as a jumping off point here. This is, as you see, the manifest, 2019 to 2024, but then on out to 2028. And as most of you know, 2028 is when we're intent on having a sustainable presence on the moon. That is not a permanent presence. It's what Jim Bridenstine has identified as a sustainable presence on the moon. That's significant. That's the beginning of colonization of the moon, the development of the moon itself. But I put this up there because this is 37 launches to carry this out as planned. 37 launches. And we're going to need help. As Bridenstine, President Trump, and others have said, we're going to need help in accomplishing this. So just go on to the next one. The other point I want to just emphasize again is the Moon-Mars mission as the next stage of civilization. This is from the cover of our sister publication, but I think it makes exactly the point that, again, we're not talking about just going to the moon. We're talking about going on to Mars. It means mastering a whole new set of technologies and know-how beyond what we've begun to think about so far. What we have back here with the Houston Community College Stafford lab, Fabrications and Innovation Lab, led by Roland. What we have with the Robotics Club, all of these things are just elements of what we're going to be needing to develop. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, but other principles of science are yet to be discovered, which are going to redefine again the platform from which we're working. Go on to the next quickly. This is Kraft Erica, just so you know. We've referenced him. This is from Life magazine back in the 60s. He was one of those people who was constantly interviewed, presenting to the population, as we need to do now, what the projects involve, why they're necessary, why they're critical to the future of mankind. And he developed, the next slide, the 3 fundamental laws of astronautics. This is in 1957 when he drew these up. And I just want to focus on the first law. Nobody and nothing under the natural laws of this universe impose any limitations on man except for man himself. A Promethean concept of man. Men and women, mankind in the universe. This was, think of it this way, as you may have heard, from the Hubble telescope we know there's over 2 trillion galaxies in our universe. And that's probably not all. That's what we know so far, approximately 2 trillion. Each one of those galaxies, as you know, probably has at least as many stars, 1 trillion stars, suns, within that galaxy. And as is estimated, that's approximately how many grains of sand there are on the Earth. So there are no limits in terms of resources, in terms of what we have to reach out into and develop and explore. So go on to the next. This is a paper craft that the craft Eric was really an inspiration for it. It was written by Mr. Lewis as an economist for Mars colonization. This was December of 1986. And I'm just going to go through some of the projects, aspects of this, which, I mean, would be generally recognized today in terms of what we have to do in terms of actually going on from the moon to Mars. We're going to have to develop the capabilities. Move on to the next slide. There. This is a rather impressive drawing of a colony on the moon. And I thought it was important to put this up just to make sure we're thinking in terms of actual colonization and development of resources. We're not talking, many of it, I believe everybody has seen pictures, you know, of a few Quonset huts and a bulldozer or something like that moving around on the moon. But if we're thinking about actually moving on to Mars, we have to actually settle the moon. And the moon has to be self-sufficient for mankind to live, to work, to supply itself with food, with energy, to assemble the vehicles from the regolith to move on to Mars. That's going to have to be built, and most of the supplies will have to come from the moon, including the fuel. And we'll come back to, as the Russian consul mentioned, helium-3. Russia, China, everyone knows that's critical. But this is in terms of what we have to be thinking about. A much more, I think this gives a much more kind of challenging sense of a future on the moon. On to the next. This is more down to earth. This is what's being worked on right now. This is at the Swamp Works. Here's a example of robotics. This machine is being controlled by a little, you know, like a remote control. This is their Rassor, or Razor, R-A-S-S-O-R, which is designed to dig on the moon for mineral resources. You may not quite get the sense of it, but you have, in the middle you have the 4 wheels that are each independently powered and can be independently guided. And then in front, you have this raised arm. That arm has a series of claws on it, which can dig and then pick up dirt. You know, like a similar machine on Earth. What am I thinking of? Backhoe would be a good example. Yes. Likewise, on the back has a similar set. So this vehicle can move forward, and then those arms come down both front and back and begin digging. The reason you have to have something like this is because you can't have a caterpillar on the moon. You've probably seen drawings of caterpillars on the moon. They won't work. You don't get any traction. There's no gravity. You know, 17% of the gravity on Earth. You won't move anything. So they've worked and solved this, and this is working in what they call a regolith bin. This is soil produced to mimic the regolith on the moon. So it's actually digging in the kind of quote-unquote soil, stone, rocky soil, that will be on the moon itself. Go on to the next slide. Another feature of what we're going to have to develop in terms of communications is laser communications. We already have some of this. This is going to be critical. We're not going to be able to rely on the kind of communications that we had and have today. We're going to have rapid communication. Lasers are going to be important for communication, but as well, move on to the next. We're going to also have, I'll come back to the lasers in a second, helium-3. Helium-3 with deuterium producing fusion energy, not fission, fusion. This is the most powerful fusion reaction possible that we know, mankind knows of. Helium-3, which is almost non-existent on the Earth, is on the moon because it has no gravitation. It has no solar wind, effectively. Well, the magnetic field is what's key. Is that the helium-3 being released off of the sun is captured on the moon, has built up on the moon over billions of years, and therefore The Russians, as we heard, China, the United States all have plans. This is one of Harrison Schmidt's projects as a geologist as well as a former astronaut. University of Wisconsin has been doing work for several years on helium-3 and developing the technologies to mine helium-3 on the moon, tying back to our laser device there. Go on to the next. But lasers will also be critical on the regolith because we're going to need to do 3D printing. We're going to need to produce on a massive scale objects, not just objects as toys, but objects as the construction material. Later on, materials that will go into the building of an armada of ships going from the moon to Mars. And so tests like this, work on the regolith, 3D manufacturing, utilizing lasers, and increasingly powerful lasers is going to be a critical feature beyond what we've developed so far. And other similar devices to the lasers we have today. Go on to the next. This is some examples of using regolith stimulants, that is, artificial regolith. Work that's going on. This is at Northwestern University. This is the production of tools. You see some wrenches here. You see building blocks down at the bottom most clearly. All of these is the work that's going on now, so that we have not only the idea of some materials abstractly that we might be able to build, but that we're actually building with those materials today. On to the next. And this is also 3D printed. Not just spider webs, but cables. This is also another, just to give you a sense of the variety of possibilities, particularly in low gravity, of what can be produced. On to the next. Now, fusion, going back to fusion, helium-3 and the development of helium-3 deuterium reactions for fusion is going to be critical for getting to Mars. We're not going to get to Mars, practically speaking, without fusion rockets, direct drive fusion rockets. Accelerating to 1G, accelerating at 1G gravity, halfway roughly to Mars, and then reversing 1G gravity deceleration the other half of the way to landing on Mars. 1G gravity is what we have on Earth. That's the safe conditions under which people can travel, maintaining 1G, as opposed, as we know from Scott Kelly and so forth, we know about the problems on the ISS, the effects of long-term living at low gravity conditions. With 1G acceleration, we can also cut the time to 3 or 4 days. From the Earth, it would be 3 or 4 days. From the Moon, it could be even quicker. But we're talking about cutting the time from 6 months or 9 months from the Earth or the Moon to Mars, to cutting that time to 3 to 4 days. Think of the reduction in terms of exposure to radiation, all of the other things which we already know about. We haven't mastered these as problems. We haven't solved the problems involved. But obviously, 1G acceleration would be a stroke, a flank that would totally transform our relationship. You could, at 1G acceleration, in 1 year, you would go about a half a light year in terms of distance. So you begin to think in terms of actually traveling even beyond the solar system with this kind of transportation. So fusion rocket engines are not that far off. Fusion is being developed in China, Japan, Russia, the United States, private and public, and other countries as well, the European Union countries and so on. So fusion is the next breakthrough. But we don't have a crash program for fusion. This is a critical, absolutely central, critical feature of what's got to be a crash program for Moon and Mars. Not simply getting back to the Moon with the technology we have today, but thinking in terms of the next 50 years. And from the next 50 years, thinking back, okay, from where we want to be 50 years from now, What do we need to begin working on now? Continue. We're going to need docking stations around Mars to dock fuel, to dock supplies, the humans, to then go down to the moon. It's not so easy or go down to Mars. Mars has 38% of the gravity of the United States, of the U.S., of the world, rather. I think it's the same thing. Excuse me. I'm trying to move along. As opposed to the moon is 17%. So there's more involved in this. So we're going to need a docking station or multiple docking stations in orbit around Mars. We're also going to want to use, just to mention it briefly, we're going to want to string an array of satellites around Mars, not just for the equivalent of GPS and communications and so forth, but also because we want to create, we're going to need a telescope with the aperture of the Mars orbit. That's ultimately where we want to get to. To see even deeper into space. We can start with Mars itself, but the concept is to move to take in the entire Mars orbit as creating the aperture of a single telescope. Just as many of you probably know, I think it was 8 telescopes around the Earth were utilized to take that snapshot, so to speak, of the black hole that was publicized about 2 or 3 months ago. That was done by a multiple effect of multiple stations and the melding of that snapshot together. On to the next. And this is a drawing actually from the article in Fusion magazine by LaRouche, by an artist, of a city on the moon. Each of those domes housing approximately 100,000 people. Again, thinking you don't go to Mars and then maintain yourself at Mars with a half a dozen people. You know, I mean, you start breaking down from an economic standpoint, the division of labor in terms of food, health care, everything else that's going to take. You're going to need a civilization to actually sustain itself on the planet. What we're talking about here is projects over the next 2 or 3 generations. This is what we're building out towards. But we have to think from this standpoint, again, looking back at where we are now and what do we have to do now. On to the next. So this goes quickly to the economics. We have to return, ironically, in a certain way it's ironic, because we're going back in time. But that's, there's a relativistic aspect that you can say to that. We have to go back to the American system of economics. And I put up here Franklin Roosevelt, Alexander Hamilton, and Abraham Lincoln as 3 examples of presidents that implemented a federal policy of federal credit, of federal national banking to finance large-scale infrastructure projects, to win wars, to build the Transcontinental Railroad, to actually jumpstart the United States when we were about to fail, as Hamilton did with the First National Bank. On to the next slide. What's required in terms of the American system is national credit. The federal government can issue credit. We've done this again and again. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation during World War II. This was Abraham Lincoln's greenback policy you might have heard of. The government issued credit. At that point, Wall Street wouldn't finance the American Civil War, wouldn't fight the effort to save the Union. So Lincoln turned to the policy of creating greenback currencies. He didn't spend it willy-nilly. It was spent for the necessary projects to sustain the war, but that meant as well the in-depth infrastructure, industry, and so forth required for that purpose. It's why we emerged out of the Civil War the most powerful nation economically in the world, as was shown at the 1876 World Exhibition. Go on to the next. And this is the reason why. I'm coming to a quick conclusion here. you take the example of science spin-offs, the program to put us on the moon cost us nothing. For all the talk about all the money we spent going to the moon, it cost us nothing, less than nothing. We got approximately $10 back for every dollar spent on the NASA projects that took us to the moon. In biomedicine, it was more like $20 for every dollar spent, and so on and so forth. But a rough figure from Chase Econometrics and others, done even in the early 1980s, was $10 back for every dollar spent. The source of that is human creativity, applied human creativity. We are not an animal. The universe is unlimited in terms of potential. You know, and our role, as Kraft Erika, his first law was indicating, there are no limits except the limits we set on ourselves. That productivity, the fact that it's more important to figure out the value of something than it is the cost, or the dollar value, the dollar figure attached to it. What is the value that producing something or doing something does to further the advancement of your nation and mankind? That's the measure of value. If you create value, you take care of yourself. The monetary side of it, you can manage. That's paper. That's something you manage in terms of credit instruments and so forth and so on. So the space program is a perfect example. The space program to take us to the moon and on to Mars will vastly pay back more than anything that we put into it. And it will be a driver to lift mankind from one infrastructure platform to the next, to advance our knowledge, to advance our living standards for all of mankind. And it is going to take all of mankind to accomplish these great tasks. So I think I'll just stop there. Thank you very much. I hope that
Excellent. Okay, so as Brian has made very clear, we are going, and where we're going is further than just to the moon, and even further than Mars, because we have to actually be thinking about mankind and the solar system for not only the next 5 years to get through to Artemis and land on the moon, but the next 50 to 100 to 500 years. We have to think further into the future. And so we're going to be opening up for discussion soon here. Before we do, I want to let you all know, I know you've enjoyed this discussion. It's brought back great memories to people. It's also, giving people optimistic vision of where we can be going for the future. But this isn't just going to happen by crossing our fingers and hoping that it happens. It's going to happen because we dedicate ourselves again to this mission, to this bold mission and commitment to the future of mankind. And one of the things that we're doing and associating with the Political Action Committee of the LaRouche PAC, which is now put out a petition. And this is a very exciting petition. And I want to tell you guys about this because this is going to be going to President Trump, going to the Congress, to really put forth the very vision and the ideas that were expressed by Brian in his presentation now. And the petition is entitled, "We Commit to the Moon Mars Mission." And I just want to read a few of the bullet points here, because we want you, in your own way, to be calling Congress to sign this petition, to actually call on the President and the Congress to act upon this commitment. It says, "We, the undersigned, pledge our commitment to the following program, and we call upon President Donald Trump and the U.S. Congress to commit to it as well." 1. Successfully realize the Artemis mission to bring mankind, including the first woman, to the moon to stay in 2024. As President Trump and his NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine have called for. 2. make Artemis the first step toward the industrialization of the moon as the economic platform, enabling human colonization of Mars and human exploration of the solar system as first thoroughly defined by the late space visionary Kraft Erica. 3, develop advanced fusion propulsion spacecraft fueled by the helium-3 resources on the moon, enabling safe and rapid human travel to Mars and other regions in the solar system, with the goal of achieving constant 1 gravity acceleration, deceleration as the standard of human interplanetary missions. 4, achieve this Moon-Mars program through an international 50-year crash program as outlined by the late economist Lyndon LaRouche, ensuring the high rates of economic payback on Earth, which can only be reached by developing new space and fusion technologies and sharing those technologies internationally as the basis of durable peace on this planet. 5, reform or eliminate the speculative and predatory aspects of the international financial system as a necessary step to ensure sovereign nations can generate the long-term credit agreements needed to facilitate this mission, as Brian just developed for us. And lastly, last call is remove barriers to international collaboration in space, especially impediments to U.S. cooperation with China and Russia, as typified by the so-called Wolf Amendment, barring NASA from working with China. So we, you have that? So we're high-tech here. And if you're interested in signing this petition, learning more about it, then you can text MOON to this number. Otherwise, you can learn more about it at our table in the back there. So I want to open it up for discussions. Okay. And before, what I want to do just quickly as well is just give our demonstrators here just a couple of minutes here just to say what they're doing with their project here. Okay.
Hi, oh my gosh, how do I know this? Hello, I'm originally from Russia, so just speaking in English with my accent. My name is Brigitte, and this is Sophia. I am just amazed at this week and what I've heard here today. I think I get a little headache. Anyway, I am not in the space program, I just put clay on things. And my client, Sophia, in 2012, the people from Russia brought a sculpture of Yuri Gagarin here to Houston. And it kind of looks like this. And if you haven't seen it, it is at the original NASA building on Wayside. And along with a panel of John Glenn. And Sophia had this wonderful idea that wouldn't it be great if Neil Armstrong was on Russian soil? So in 2012, she asked the gentleman who donated Yuri if we could put a sculpture of Neil Armstrong there, and they broke ground, yes. And so, yeah. So now it's up to my wonderful client to try to find underwriters for this project. One is going to just Ethnomir, just outside of Moscow, and the other exact duplicate is going to Space Center Houston. So we're really excited about this project. There's flyers back there, and I'm sure you're probably going, I don't have that type of money. But you may know somebody, so just tell somebody about the project. It's really exciting, and I have to say this, I was a little girl when I saw everything on TV, and I would never have guessed I'd be standing here with a Russian friend and putting a sculpture on Russian soil. Never in a million years would I have guessed that. So thank you so much, and I appreciate giving us this time.
May I say my own short story? The point is just talking to Professor. It was very nice. Thank you very much for your everything what you have done and you told. I'm from Siberia. We immigrated 30 years ago from Novosibirsk. When Neil Armstrong visited Novosibirsk with a group of people in 1970, there is a museum of Yuri Kondratyov. Do you know his name? He created trajectory to the moon. Yeah. And Neil Armstrong came to his museum, grabbed the soil, it's a legend, I read about this, grabbed the soil and told this soil has the same value like soil from the moon. And you know what? This scientist who created this trajectory to the moon, he was killed during World War II. And when we opened, had groundbreaking event in Russia, and then it happened. The grave of this scientist is in the same area. Just world is small, but we hope that we will open Neil Armstrong statue there.
UnitedInSpace.com if you want more information. And you can also go back there and talk to them. But if there's questions, we have Mr. Cooper available. I'll take any questions, and Brian as well. But please, any thoughts, questions, ideas? Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question. I know when you were talking about using the settling the moon and everything, and developing your own power plants and things such as that, would it be feasible to use solar power in any way? For energy?
Yes? You want to say something about it, or you want?
Yes, the short answer is yes, and then no. Yes, in that that's why part of the reason also we're going to the South Pole. The South Pole is, as you may know, is an area where you can have, at least at the peaks, almost complete sunlight year-round. So you have access to the sun. So that's a reason for going there, because we're not going to have other sources of fuel, until we start developing them. Well, that's the problem. The problem comes in is that to begin transforming the regolith into structures, that is building things, to undertake mining on a large scale, you're going to have energy available at much, much higher energy flux densities, like lasers, powerful. Solar is not going to provide that. It'd be like trying to turn on your light bulb by burning coal. You can take coal and burn it and turn turn it into water into steam and drive a turbine, but you need electricity. So. Oh, sure, for limited purposes. That'll have to be worked out, right? It's a practical question. But we're going to have to be thinking as we are already with many of our Mars projects. They're using, they have nuclear power. And it's going to be necessary to move up the ladder in terms of more advanced technologies. Nuclear technology is absolutely critical beyond that into the future.
The other thing is there's 2 weeks of night time. There's 2 weeks of night.
Oh, 2 weeks of night. Yeah, 2 weeks of night at a time on the moon. So how do you have to have a lot of storage batteries.
So you seem to know a lot about the regolith, and the regolith seems to be one of the biggest problems from what my understanding is, because of its very nature being like glass dust, basically. So I understand that it actually went through the Kevlar of their spacesuits. Have y'all found a solution for that?
Well, NASA, I'm not the scientist, and that's something that's been worked on and continue to be worked on. And so they think they have solutions, both the private sector and NASA itself, and other countries, of course, have worked on it as well. Keisha quoted Harrison Schmidt, just on the regolith otherwise, that as a geologist, who studied the regolith on the moon and after when it came back, that the regolith can be transformed into usable soil. It can be, it'll make it a piece of cake, as he said. That's part of what he's talking about. That it's not an insurmountable problem, but it is important what you brought up. But it's been being worked on ever since. That's what I can say. Lee, I'd like to really thank HCC staffers.
HCC staffers, yes. Thank you.
Application and innovation. Okay. And the Houston Robotics Club, now USAI Labs. USAI Labs. The robot, and discuss with them what they're doing. They're setting up now at the West Loop. Right? HCC on the West Loop.
West Loop and Stafford.
West Loop and Stafford.
Both campuses. All right. So, and thank you for our friends. Art is also part of advancing mankind's knowledge. So.
Thank you.
Yes. Excellent. Well, we want to thank you all for coming out. We want to thank all our young people here, also representing robotics at high school, at Stafford High School. And it's excellent to see so much optimism and so much excitement about our space program. And again, do you have any final words of wisdom for us? Would you like to say anything else? Thank you so much.
I think nuclear fusion is going to be the greatest challenge.
Fusion?
Yeah. We worked on, I took a class in nuclear fusion in 1962 at the University of Alabama. Wow. And it was kind of a survey where we were. And we weren't very far. And we really have not solved that problem, and there's doubts whether we ever will, but hopefully we can.
All right, thank you again for being here with us, and thank you all for coming out tonight. So as I said, we have some material in the back. There's still a few minutes left for you to go and check out the HCC fabrication and 3D printing and all of the other displays that we have there. So thank you again.
Maybe learning about NASA and stuff like that.
Put the chairs back.